Hello, friends. Welcome back to ABN and the Trinity channel for another episode of Islam and the News. And I want to welcome you back because we've been on a 6-week vacation from live shows, other than the 12th anniversary show that we did just a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't seen that, you can go to the Trinity channel's YouTube channel and you will find that listed there. But other than that show and Arabic show here and there and some discipleship shows that are continuing for the discipleship series. Other than that, the normal weekly shows that you find only here on ABN and the Trinity channel, which is of course, Colliding Worldviews on Mondays, Truth Matters, which is Ratio Christi Television, Tuesday nights as well. If you didn't know, rerun of Truth Matters is also playing on NRB TV every Saturday night now as well. That is DirecTV channel 378. That's going to 42 million homes across the United States. But also, of course, The Cross and the Crescent on Tuesday with Pastor Joseph and Islam and the News. These 4 weekly shows have been on break for the last 6 weeks, and it is a blessing to come back. I hope that you are enjoying your summer, if you are in the northern hemisphere at least. Those people who are in the southern hemisphere, certain areas of it, at least, depending on how south you are experiencing snow right now, even though it is the month of July. Today is July 21st in the year of our Lord 2017. And as always, during every episode of Islam in the News, I have a lot of news stories to share with you. I always have to dwindle it down to get the most important info, especially the info that you do not find in the mainstream media, as I go through a lot of different news sites and try to compile news that will benefit you and, again, other people as well. So I ask that in addition to watching the show live every week, that you would take the video that is on the YouTube channel, as well as my Vimeo channel, where I upload all the shows that I do. You can take the links and share them on social media, and of course through email as well. Just get the URL and send it to people who may not use social media because they need the news and all this other info that we do on these shows as well. So God bless you, and we thank you for being loyal viewers to ABN and the Trinity channel. Thank you for your financial support. The Lord has blessed the effort over the last 6 weeks as the network has worked on support raising, and many people throughout the world who love ABN and the Trinity channel have come forward and given to allow all of this work to continue. And all of the satellites are continuing right now. We are so glad to know that the Middle East satellite continues to flow. And we ask that you would continue to give to ABN and the Trinity channel every single month, as it's thousands and thousands of dollars to fund this ministry. And of course, this media ministry that it is very vital, because this is going through satellite throughout the world, through high-speed internet throughout the world. And now if you go to trinitychannel.com, you will see there on the homepage, you scroll down a little bit, you actually see some thermometers. And we're actually letting you know now what the monthly costs are for the different satellites, and of course the digital tree as well, which is a lot cheaper, but of course is still an expense. And we let you know where we are at, because we want to let you know, as loyal viewers and loyal givers to ABN and the Trinity channel, this is where we're at. The Lord has provided over the years. He continues to provide, but again, he does that through people like you who see the need for this vital ministry and say, I want to help support it. But we do have those barometers. They're on the donate page now, actually. We're continuing to revamp the site and just make it more high-tech looking and visually appealing. So go to trinitychannel.com, click around. You'll see some different things where you can check different areas out. But again, we do let you know where we are at and how the Lord is providing, and that encourages all of us. That encourages us to see that come in, and that encourages a lot of our viewers to see, oh, other people are giving too. Other people see the need in this ministry, and we want to help support it. So getting now to the news, of course, a whole lot of things have happened over the last 6 weeks. I have posted some of those news stories on my Facebook page. Since I have not been doing this show, I've been putting some things there. Another big thing, too, that has happened over these last 6 weeks, of course, a lot of you I know haven't heard, but many of you know Dr. James White, a Christian who has done a lot of debates with Muslims over the years. And many of you also know, or may not know, about a Muslim named Yasser Qadhi. And this dialogue that happened between them actually happened back at the beginning of the year, but it was just in the last couple of months that word really spread about it. And there's this huge, big old ordeal and conversation that's been going on amongst a lot of different parties about the nature of this event that James White did with Yasser Qadi, who is a imam. He's also a professor in Tennessee, where he lives. And they've had a relationship for years, but it was just in 2017, again, around January, I believe, that they had a two-part event. The first event happened in a church, and Yasser Qadi came to that. The second event was in a mosque, and James White went to the mosque. And unlike the debates that James White's been doing for many years, this was actually a dialogue where they said, hey, we aren't going to debate. And this stems a little bit from Yasser Qadi saying that, hey, he's not super knowledgeable about Christianity. He's not a debater, quote unquote. So they decided to do a dialogue. But that is one of the reasons why a lot of people have had a problem with this is, okay, well, you're doing this dialogue, which, whether you know it or not, actually lines right up with one of the tactics used by the Muslim Brotherhood and their front groups. They set up regularly around the United States these dialogues, interfaith dialogues, religious dialogues, panel discussions, where there's a Muslim, and then usually there is a liberal Jew, and then there is usually a pastor from, for example, a Unitarian Universalist church. And then this is advertised as Muslims, Jews, and Christians together. And this is one of the many tactics that they use to make Islam acceptable in the West and palatable to the West. So a lot of people, again, there's a number of factors here. People have problem with Yasser Qadi in particular, especially because he's the one who James White did this with. There's other people who are just concerned about the nature of the event, that it was a dialogue, quote unquote, rather than a debate, which, as far as I have heard, no one's ever complained about James White debating a Muslim before. And of course, he who does the inviting does the endorsing. So if Yasser Qadi or any Muslim wants to invite James White or any Christian to a mosque to present the gospel, I mean, we should jump on that opportunity. But that's what you need to think about, though, when you flip it. Just like when the Mormons, I'm sure there's people out there who don't know, but the main Mormon temple, tabernacle, they invited Ravi Zacharias to go and speak there at least once, if not, I think probably twice, perhaps 3 times. I don't recall the amount of times, but and some people gave him flack about that. But again, he who does the inviting does the endorsing. So if a temple, a Mormons, LDS, are inviting Ravi Zacharias to come and speak, they are endorsing him, and not vice versa. Now, that is completely different than Ravi Zacharias inviting, the head of the Mormon church to go and speak at a Christian event or in a church or whatever kind of thing. So that's another factor, of course, involved in this. That's not the only factor. But yeah, very interesting. So anyway, if you have not heard about this, or you don't have all the details from both sides, if you go to my Facebook page, facebook.com/Tony Gourlay RC, you scroll down a bit, you'll see a timeline where I try to get a chronological list of the back and forth discussion, mainly between James White and his Dividing Line shows, and then also Usama Dakduk, Brandon House, and I forget his first name, but his last name's Hadrian. The 3 of them were really emphasizing the political aspect of this. They're concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood, the political aspect of the religio-political system known as Islam. And then, of course, I had James White's, back and forth conversation. And also in there, too, is a informal debate, quote unquote, between James White and Robert Spencer. That is in there as well, which happened on Dr. Michael Brown's The Line of Fire radio show. So anyway, very interesting events. And again, there's people within evangelicalism, outside of evangelicalism, of course, where just this is pretty much news that I would have discussed over these last 6 weeks. But now there are people who are still just finding out about this for the first time. So you're seeing it still continue to spread on social media. Anyway, go to my Facebook page, check that out. And thank you for coming back after the 6-week vacation, quote unquote, from doing live shows. We're glad to have you here. And I do have a number of news stories that I do want to get to. So let's get to the first one. This is actually breaking news that just came out today, and there may be more news out now, but this here is Russell Square evacuated. Loud explosion heard in central London. This is from express.co.uk. It says Russell Square has been evacuated and a loud explosion has been heard in the central London neighborhood. Hundreds of visitors were cleared from the British Museum as police responded to reports of a suspect vehicle. A controlled explosion was later heard as the evacuation continued in the heart of London. Photos taken at the scene show a park area sealed off by police with thousands of visitors gathered outside the museum. Shocked social media users reported hearing an explosion as they were evacuated. One said on Twitter, quote, a loud bang followed by sirens. We've just been told that there's been an incident and we need to leave the building. Another said, building on right is my office. Could see police cordons that were asked to vacate office. Another said, workplace evacuated due to suspect package near Russell Square. Heard what I assume was a controlled explosion. A fourth said, something kicking off at Russell Square, police tape everywhere around some coaches. The British Museum said, quote, the museum is evacuated temporarily due to a security concern nearby. We apologize and will update when we can. The Met Police told express.co.uk the security alert was a result of an unattended vehicle. So that news will continue definitely with that news headline, and that's all I have on that right now. But getting to Jordan, the country of Jordan, I have here, Jordan makes improvements to child marriage law. This is out of Clarion Project. It says here, Jordan recently canceled a 2011 law regarding child marriage and replaced it with a new law containing a plethora of guidelines that human rights activists are hopeful will discourage the practice. When the old law only required a judge to approve that the conditions were suitable, quote unquote, to marriage under the age of 18, the new law specifies those conditions. They include 1, no marriage under 15 years old. 2, the couple must show a need or good reason for the marriage. 3, the court must declare the groom suitable for the bride. 4, the bride must freely agree to the marriage. Next, we have courts must ascertain the marriage will not create any damage. The age difference between the couple may not exceed 15 years. The groom cannot have other wives. The bride must be able to continue her schooling. The groom must prove he has the ability to support the bride and pay her mahir, bride price. The groom is able to provide adequate housing for the couple. The couple must present a medical certificate they are both healthy. The bride's legal guardian must approve of the marriage. The bride has the right to demand that the marriage agreement includes any conditions that she sees fit that will benefit her. The bride and groom must go to a special course about marriage and present the court with a certificate that they have completed the course. If the court is undecided as to whether or not to grant approval to the marriage, they can pass the case to the Governmental Office of Reform, Arbitration, and Family Success. This office must then present its opinion to the court. The groom must present the court a certificate from the Department of Minor Affairs that the department agrees to the marriage. So this is completely in opposition to Sharia or marriage under Sharia, as we see the lifestyle of Muhammad himself. Of course, all of these stipulations were not in place, but at least these are in place now in Jordan. So it will be interesting to see in the days, weeks, and months to come what happens and what other news stories come out due to this story here. Now on to Syria. From Al-Alam, I have Syrian government retakes 40 oil rigs from ISIS in Raqqa province. Since the beginning of July, over 40 oil pumping stations have been retaken under the control of the Syrian government. All of them have been destroyed by the retreating ISIS terrorists. And this is a quote by Ali Ibrahim, the petroleum engineer in charge for the restoration of oil production facilities in Raqqa province. And this is what he told reporters. It says, since the beginning of the Syrian government's forces' offensive in early July on Raqqa, the de facto ISIS capital, the militants have been expelled from the main oil-producing areas of the province, the engineer added. It says, quote, after clearing of the ways to the oil fields off mines, the pumps will be demounted and taken to the city of Hama for reconstruction. The majority of the oil spots will resume operation by the end of July, the engineer explained. It says the ISIS terrorists dismantled a lot of oil rigs in Raqqa province. Particularly, around 50 facilities have been destroyed in the area of Tabqa oil field. On Wednesday, a Syrian military source told Sputnik that Damascus forces have regained control over 15 oil wells, a gas field, and pumping stations in the south of Raqqa province. It also says Syria has been engulfed in a civil war for over 6 years, with the government troops fighting against numerous opposition factions as well as terrorist groups. Moving on to The Sun, I have here, we really want to die. Hundreds of ISIS jihadis infected with diseases are crammed into tiny Mosul prison cells in 45 degrees Celsius heat after being captured by Iraqi forces. Now, I have a number of pictures to show you here. It says grim jail overwhelmed with detainees following the end of the grueling 9-month campaign to retake the city. Hundreds of suspected ISIS jihadis are being held in a cramped and stifling prison near Mosul after they were captured by Iraqi forces liberating the city. Reporters from the Associated Press saw more than 100 prisoners packed into one dark room, lined up shoulder to shoulder on the floor. Hundreds of suspected ISIS jihadis are crammed into this room, as you can see. Most of the men are riddled with disease, but jail authorities are overwhelmed after the recapture of Mosul by Iraqi forces. There is no electricity or ventilation despite daytime temperatures over that 45 degrees Celsius. That is actually 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The Iraqi officer in charge of the grim jail said it currently holds some 370 prisoners. He says authorities were overwhelmed with the detainees and Iraqi forces when they cleared the last neighborhoods of the city earlier in the month at the end of the grueling 9-month campaign. Says that they have health and skin problems, and also the majority can't walk. Their legs are swollen because they can't move. More than 1,150 detainees have passed through the prison over the past 3 months, with 540 sent to Baghdad for further investigation, the officer said. Another 2,800 prisoners are being held in the Karaya air base south of Mosul, and hundreds more in similar smaller facilities. ISIS declared a caliphate in Mosul, Iraq's second city, after the death cult fanatics swept across northern and central Iraq in the summer of 2014. And as most of you know, of course, all these stories about ISIS have been ongoing as they've continued to spread, but also more recently, they've continued to lose more and more territories as locals and, of course, forces take back those areas. I have here from Front Page Mag, it says, ISIS jihadist credits moderate Muslim Brotherhood as inspiration. This is from Daniel Greenfield. It says, while most of the attention was on Egypt and its Muslim Brotherhood takeover, a similar takeover was being championed by the defenders of democracy in Tunisia. There, the jihadis of Ennahda were suddenly transformed into moderates, despite views that were anything but. The classical example of this came with the transforming of Sheikh Rashid al-Ghanouchi, its jihadist leader, into a moderate. Despite a few minor hiccups, it says here, Sheikh Rashid al-Ghanouchi, the head of Tunisia's controversial Islamist Ennahda movement, is scheduled to head a lecture Tuesday afternoon in Yale's law school, according to the school's website. Al-Ghanouchi's upcoming appearance of the Ivy League school could become controversial given to the Sheikh's long-term support for radical terror groups and his past calls for Muslims to wage unceasing war against the Americans. The sheikh's violent rhetoric, radical leanings, and endorsement of Hamas led him to be banned from entering the United States for a time. Sheikh Rashid, of Tunisia's equally moderate Islamist Ennahda movement, said, "There are no civilians in Israel. The population, males, females, and children, are the Army Reserve soldiers and thus can be killed." Greenfield goes on to say this is what the left supported when it backed the Muslim Brotherhood. The results nearly led to a Benghazi massacre in Tunisia, even before that attack took place. Moving on to VOA News, I have top U.S. officials, Islamic State leader still alive. This here is picture number 8. I have 2 of the top U.S. officials are shooting down claims that the leader of the Islamic State terror group is dead. There have been multiple reports in recent weeks from Russia, Syria, Iran, and even from a human rights organization that the Islamic State self-declared caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed in Iraq or Syria. On Friday, however, both U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and National Counterterrorism Center Director Nick Rasmussen said there is no proof Baghdadi has been killed. It says here, quote, "I think Baghdadi's alive," Mattis told Pentagon reporters, adding that despite keeping a low profile, the IS leader likely was still involved in the terror group's decision-making. It says, quote, "We're trying to track him pretty closely," Mattis said. "He's declared war on us, so he's going to reap his reward for it." Earlier Friday, the National Counterterrorism Center's Rasmussen said those claiming Baghdadi is dead have yet to prove any sort of proof. Now, this is, of course, a vital topic to talk about because although there are people out there who say, well, you know, if Baghdadi is killed, then that solves the problem. Well, no, because those are the people usually who say, well, everything was fine in the world, or there was no problem with Islam, or Islamic history is not violent, the life of Muhammad was not violent, etc. And then all of a sudden, this ISIS thing comes about, and it's basically a shift from this peaceful religion of Islam. Now, that, of course, if you have studied history, if you read the Quran, if you've studied the Hadith, if you studied the Sirah literature, the biographies of Muhammad, if you've studied Al-Tabari, early Islamic history, and of course a number of other great sources, if you're really trying to get back to how this all began, that lines up more with ISIS and their daily actions than your moderate Muslim neighbor who loves America and loves the Constitution and loves the Bill of Rights. Scholars have said if Muhammad were alive today, he wouldn't just join ISIS, he would actually lead it. And that's not just some rhetoric because they don't like Muslims or whatever. It's like if you study the life of Muhammad and compare that to ISIS, that has a lot of similarities there of what they're doing. And it's even to the point now where many Islamic groups out there are no longer saying ISIS is not Islamic. Now they're scaling back and saying, well, oh, they're kind of outside the fold, or there's certain reasons why we just have problems with them. But again, the political Islamists, their biggest problem with ISIS is that they're moving too fast, too soon. The end goal of ISIS plan is the same as the political Islamists. They want the world under Sharia. They want Islam to set the agenda. And ISIS is impatient. They want a caliphate yesterday, where the Muslim Brotherhood and political Islamists are patient. And if they say, hey, it's going to take 30 years to do this, well, they'll take the 30 years to do it. So same timeline and same end goal. It's just that ISIS is very impatient compared to the political Islamists out there. And again, taking out one man, taking out Baghdadi, isn't going to change the false worldview of 1.6 billion Muslims out there. That is why the gospel needs to continue to be shared, because when a person realizes who Jesus Christ truly is, that he's not the Isa of the Quran, but he's the eternal Son of God incarnate. He took on a second nature, a human nature, and that is why He performed miracles. That's why he knew the hearts and minds of men and women. He forgave sin. Who can forgive sin but God alone? Jesus, in so many ways, said that he was God. He said, hey, I and my Father are one. And he has a Father, and of course, the Father has a Son, and that Son incarnate is Jesus Christ. Now, if God created this world from nothing, then he can certainly enter into this creation. No problem, if he chooses to. Now, many Muslims say, well, yeah, but why would he do that? Well, asking that question is a completely different question and answer than can God enter into creation if he chooses to. And again, the Father and the Holy Spirit did not, but the Son did. And only when a person repents and puts their trust in Christ and they're then indwelled by the Holy Spirit will their worldview actually change. And if there's mosques throughout America, there's mosques throughout the world, and there's one on every single corner, well, who cares if they're all empty? Because if you want to see mosques empty, then you should be out there sharing the gospel with Muslims. Now, I know if you live in the East or in areas where there's a lot of persecution going on, it's going to be a little bit harder for you than people in the West and in America. And I'm sure if the Christians in the East could send a message to the Christians in the West, you would say, hey, you have the freedom to share the gospel all day and all night long. You have the freedom to give a Bible to a Muslim. So I want to encourage Christians in the West to reach out to your Muslim neighbors, love them, and don't let them define Islam, because they don't. Muhammad defined Islam 1,400 years ago. So know what Islam actually teaches, but at the same time, love your Muslim neighbor or friend or coworker, because they're actually a human being made in the image of God, who Jesus Christ can save, but they need to repent, put their trust in him, and that will only happen when they hear the gospel. And to our Christian brothers and sisters in the Middle East and other countries, we pray for you that the Lord would strengthen you and that he would give you perseverance and give you the ability and divine opportunities to share the gospel with Muslims, and that God would prepare their hearts and minds for you to talk with them, to where you are actually seeing fruit, and that both you and the Muslim are like, wow, this is kind of like a divine appointment here. So we definitely want those interactions to continue. But I have here from Counter Jihad Report, willful ignorance. House rejects Representative Frank's proposal to study Islam. Now, of course, no surprise here. By 9 votes, 217 to 208, the House of Representatives on Friday voted down a proposal to identify, quote, Islamic religious doctrines, concepts, or schools of thought, unquote, that jihad terrorists use. 20 Republicans joined the solid Democratic bloc to vote down the measure, which Muslim Representative Keith Ellison, a Democrat from Minnesota, termed wrong-headed, quote unquote, and fought hard to defeat. It's hard to believe that there would be 217 votes against understanding the ideology that provides and incites jihad violence, but that testifies to the power of the Islamophobia victimhood lobby today. The measure would have directed the Defense Department to carry out, quote, strategic assessments of the use of violent or unorthodox Islamic religious doctrine to support extremist or terrorist messaging and justification. It also says there's nothing unorthodox about jihad violence in Islamic law and doctrine, yet even though this specification that the Islamic doctrines to be studied were unorthodox, quote unquote, allowed for support from those who hold that jihad terror is a twisting and hijacking of the religion of peace. That wasn't good enough. According to Politico, the proposal received heavy criticism from Muslim lawmakers serving in Congress, Muslim interest groups, and the American Civil Liberties Union, who say the proposal would unfairly target Muslims. Ellison added, if you have an amendment that says we're going to study one religion and only one, we're going to look at their leaders and put them on a list, only them, and you are going to talk about what's orthodox practice and what's unorthodox, then you are putting extra scrutiny on that religion. It says here, yes, you are. And there's a reason for that. 30,000 jihad attacks committed in the name of Islam and in accord with its teachings since September 11th, 2001. No one religion has anything approaching that kind of record of death and destruction. So why shouldn't we put extra scrutiny on that religion? The Muslim Brotherhood-linked Ellison also claimed that the measure was abridging the free exercise of that religion. Now, this article goes on. Again, you can find that at counterjihadreport.com. And again, this goes right back to what I said earlier of this belief that Islam is this religion of peace, and that it has been hijacked by jihadists, by Al-Qaeda, by ISIS, and by all these other groups. The thing is that when we say Islam is a religion of peace, or more specifically, when Islam claims to be a religion of peace, or a Muslim says Islam is a religion of peace, if they know their theology, they have to admit, though they won't probably to you, that when they say peace, peace is a goal or an end and not a means. Because when they say Islam is a religion of peace, they're referring to when the entire world is under Sharia, there's no more Dar al-Harb, just the whole world is under Dar al-Islam, well, then there's no more opposition, there's no more jahili system influencing anyone for the negative, and it's peace, quote unquote. There's no more opposition to the Dar al-Islam. So remember, when it comes to people asking, like I had someone ask me recently, oh, is Islam a religion of peace? The first question I asked him is, what do you mean by peace? And he said, well, peace and tranquility, peace. And I said, well, no, not if that's what you mean. But when we say Islam is a religion of peace, again, the religion itself, when it says, okay, this is a religion of peace, is again referring to an end and not the means. Jihad is the means in which Islam is spread, of course, with no compulsion in religion, but through jihad, they can bring areas under Sharia. And as different Muslims have said throughout the years, that when people are under Sharia, that's when they can freely decide to either come to Islam or to deny it. And of course, you're Jew or Christian, you can have dimitude, of course, and if you aren't, though, then it's just, convert or die. But anyway, that's why the terms need to be defined, and unfortunately, they're never really defined. But that is what we are talking about, and that's what people need to be informed about when we talk about Islam being a religion of peace. Just remember, it is a goal, and peace is a goal, and peace isn't the means. And that's how you work that out with what's going on around the world. Moving on to Freedom and Daily, I have Boston on brink of civil war over Muslims' huge signs that just popped up after white woman killed. It says here, Muslims in America are becoming bolder than ever Muslims in America are becoming bolder than they ever have before as the threat of losing their, quote, religious rights, unquote, and ultimately control is imminent under the new leadership. With every heinous crime committed in this country by Muslims, their claim of assimilation and desire for equality is compromised. This has never been more the case than it is right now. About 36 hours after an innocent white woman was killed by a Somali Muslim cop in Minnesota, a new story I will get to soon, who had no business wearing the badge. Rather than staying silent on the matter and proving they're peaceful, Muslims in Massachusetts got loud, proud, and disgusting with what they blasted on massive billboards in Boston. Islam was praised and protected for 8 years under our former president, and now their plan for complete domination over this country is slipping away. Fed up with being feared after every attack, Muslims in Boston just fought back at concerned citizens and President Donald Trump with a massive message all around the busy public transit system that cannot be ignored. Now, it's only a matter of time before civil war erupts in the streets there based on what the sign says. President Trump is a Muslim's worst nightmare since he doesn't make apologies for what needs to be done to protect Americans, no matter who it offends. With the constant chatter of concern for Islamophobia after any attack, Islam-sympathizing city workers in Boston want to get their misguided message out about who's really at fault. And it's not the Somali cop who pulled the trigger. The investigation is still not completed into what Sunday night that led to bride-to-be Justine Damon being shot dead, but Muslims are already making their case against the American people with the help of city workers. Now, I think we showed there a poster says what to do if you are witnessing Islamophobic harassment, and that has some step-by-step guide there. And as you see at the very bottom, it says City of Boston. We have that stamp of approval on there. So that is what that is referring to, and you can get more details about that again at freedomdaily.com. But I have here from front page, Linda Sarsour is better at name-calling and victimhood than anything else. There's no doubt that this is Linda Sarsour's moment. At no other time in history would anyone have taken her seriously. It's not just that the left has a burning fetish for Islamists these days. At no point in time has that been more so, even post 9/11. It's that her worthless skill set of name-calling, fake outbursts of narcissistic victimhood passed off as courage, meshes perfectly with the left's identity politics, safe space culture. Sarsour threw one of her usual fits when questions were raised about the money supposedly raised to repair Jewish cemeteries. When her call for a jihad was criticized, she played the victim in a Washington Post piece. In response to questions about the Women's March celebrating Assata Shakur, a cop killer and black nationalist heroine of, among others, the Black Lives Matter hate group, Sarsour accused Jake Tapper of being alt-right. And then there were all the threats of an enemies list. It says here at the bottom, it's becoming really obvious that Sarsour's basic skill set is 1, playing the victim, 2, calling everyone else names. At no point in time could Sarsour's skill set have meshed better with the wrecked state of the left. Speaking of Linda Sarsour, I have here also from front page, Linda Sarsour's Saudi Arabia arrests woman in skirt for disrespecting teachings of Islam. According to the Islamophilic left, Muhammad was the original feminist. Islamic teachings are progressive toward women, with their emphasis on wife-beating and sexually abusing 7-year-old girls, while Christians like Mike Pence are mean fundamentalists who hate women. That's why leftists break out their Handmaid's Tale costumes to protest Pence and Ryan. Never mind that the Handmaid's Tale novel is an obvious effort to transfer over life for women in Islamic Iran over to post-apocalyptic America with Christianity, very implausibly standing in for Islam. So here, out of such chaotic and mangled double standards, we get a women's march led by Linda Sarsour, who promotes Saudi Arabia. It says here, Sarsour has tweeted defenses of Saudi Arabia's Islamic treatment of women, worried about Saudi Arabia not letting women drive, 10 weeks of paid maternity leave in Saudi Arabia, yes, paid, and you're worrying about women driving, puts us to shame. In Saudi Arabia, your boogeyman Islamic State, women are in parliament, Sarsour furiously tweeted. Sharia law is reasonable, and once you read into the details, it makes a lot of sense. People just know the basics, Sarsour tweeted. Here's another one of those basics of Sharia law, courtesy of Linda Sarsour's favorite place, Saudi Arabia. A model who was seen wearing a short skirt and crop top in a small Saudi Arabian town has reportedly been arrested. The model, named only as Hulud, sparked controversy on social media after she shared a video on Snapchat walking through the heritage village of Ushekar, dressed in a short skirt, black crop top, and sneakers. An arrest warrant issued by Riyadh police and shared by several Twitter users shows that the woman had been arrested on Monday for, quote, disrespecting and violating the teachings of Islam. After the video went viral, officials in Ashogar called on the region's governor and police to take actions against the woman in response to the video without elaborating further. The kingdom's morality police said in a tweet at that time that it has responded with other agencies to investigate further after the video was brought to their attention. So, moving on to the U.S., but still speaking of Saudi Arabia, or Saudi Arabian here, we have Idaho State University, Saudi Muslim student arrested after kidnapping a motorist at knife point. Police said 23-year-old Saud Khalid Al-Mudihim, a student from Saudi Arabia who was living in Pocatello, was charged with 2 counts of felony aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and 1 felony charge of second-degree kidnapping. Around 2 a.m. Sunday, police said they received a call from a motorist claiming that Al-Muhadin brandished a black box cutter style knife and demanded a ride from the Jackson's food stores on South 5th Avenue to an area near the Ridgecrest Apartments on Bart's Way. After dropping Al-Mudahim off, police said the victim called police to report the incident. Later, at a Chevron gas station, Al-Mudahim used the same black box cutter style knife to threaten other motorists for a ride. Upon arrival, police determined Al-Mudahim was allegedly involved in the original complaint and arrested him at the gas station. If convicted of the aggravated assault charges, Al-Mudahim will face up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. The second-degree kidnapping charge carries a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison. Al-Mudahim is currently incarcerated at the Bannock County Jail, and bond in the case was set at $50,000. Now, I have here from Breitbart, Yazidi women join the battle for Raqqa to avenge themselves against the Islamic State. An all-female fighting force from the Yazidi community known as the Sinjar's Women's Units, SWU, announced on Monday that it has joined the battle for Raqqa, the Islamic State's capital in Syria. Now, this news story is interesting without going into the details here. Just the fact that this Yazidi, he says, your Yazidi women made it clear that they wish to avenge themselves for the hideous depredations inflicted on them by ISIS. So you have women here who are fighting ISIS. A news story that came out a little while back last month was why Kurdish women joined the fight against ISIS. So we have all these women who are fighting ISIS, and yet we see in all these different pictures, or many pictures of the refugees who are coming to the West, a lot of males, which seem to be roughly military age, like 18 to say 40 or so. A couple things here. I mean, the U.S. military went over there and set up a green zone, a safe zone during the wars that were over there. So some people say, well, why can't a green zone or safe zone be set up in these countries where people are, where they're being threatened by ISIS, or, you know, if ISIS gets to where they are, they're obviously going to be threatened by ISIS. You know, why isn't there a safe zone over there rather than sending everyone out west? And why weren't a lot of these males who were coming to the West, why didn't they stay, and why weren't they given weapons and fighting ISIS and the jihadis like these women are? There seems to be a problem here. We have news stories of many different women in different areas who are fighting ISIS, and yet the guys are coming to the West. And what happens if, like I said, Baghdad, you know, the thing about Baghdadi being, you know, say he's gone tomorrow, or even if ISIS is gone tomorrow, does that mean that, okay, everything's fine over here now, let's go ahead and, you know, pick up all these refugees who just went to the West, and let's go ahead and bring them back now? I mean, does anyone think that that's actually going to happen? I probably not. And the thing is that even just the fact of financially perspective of all this, can the West, whatever country it is in Europe or even the United States, handle an instant influx of thousands and thousands of people into the system, getting free everything, right? I mean, we already have a deficit. We already in how many trillions of dollars of debt, and okay, more from this. And again, that's something that's, I don't know, has really been discussed at all. Well, what happens after ISIS is defeated? What happens after this jihadist problem is taken care of, which again is never ultimately going to be taken care of if the worldview itself still exists in the minds of individuals. And that's why the gospel needs to be shared with people. But also, too, in the last 6 weeks that we've had a break, there has been stories about ISIS moving into the Philippines. And I have here from the Duran, it says, confirmed ISIS in Syria helped fund ISIS in the Philippines. A network of money transfers from ISIS in the Middle East to its syndicates in Asia, combined with the drug trade, has allowed ISIS to enrich itself in the Philippines. It says here, a new counterterrorism report from the Indonesian Institute for Policy Analysis of Conflict has investigated and confirmed claims that the ISIS insurgency in southern Philippines, particularly on the island of Mindanao, which is under a higher degree of Sharia than other areas of the Philippines. Mindanao has a lot of Muslims there. Sharia is enforced to a greater degree. is partly funded by ISIS syndicates in the Middle East, including and specifically in the illegally ISIS-occupied regions of eastern Syria. Now, it goes into different details here, including $600,000 from ISIS in Syria, which he then, this Malaysian Dr. Mahmoud Ahmad was said to have received $600,000 from ISIS in Syria, which he then sent to terrorists in southern Philippines. So there have been a number of news stories about the Philippines and what's happening over there. Some have turned out to be ISIS, some others that thought were to be ISIS actually weren't. But it's going to be interesting to see as ISIS gets pushed out of these areas in Iraq, Syria, what have you. Is it just going to go away, or are they, of course, going to spread to other areas? And ISIS has already said before that they are going to infiltrate the West through these groups of refugees who are coming to the West. From CBA News, I have here Trump reportedly ending CIA plan to arm Syrian rebels. It says troubled secret program to be phased out, according to Washington Post. U.S. President Donald Trump has decided to halt the CIA's years-long covert program to arm and train moderate Syrian rebels battling the regime of the nation's president Bashar al-Assad. Russia had long pushed the United States to end the program. The phasing out of the secret program was reported by the Washington Post on Wednesday. Officials told the newspaper that ending the operation reflects Trump's interest in finding ways to work with Russia. So that definitely will be interesting to see where that heads to after that is stopped. But also here from Yahoo, I have Supreme Court grandparents and grandkids are exempted from Trump travel ban. Yes, the travel ban stories continue to be spread as new details come about. It says here the Supreme Court dealt President Donald Trump's government a fresh setback Wednesday, saying its controversial travel ban cannot be applied to grandparents and other close relatives of people living in the United States for now. The court accepted a Hawaii federal judge's ruling last week that the Trump administration had too narrowly defined what constitutes, quote, close family relationships to determine exceptions to the ban on travelers from 6 mainly Muslim countries: Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. I have here from Act for America, the real jihadist threat no one is watching. It says most people can tell you who the potential jihadists are, especially ones in Europe and the USA. You can point them out in a group. They are immigrants, or more often the children of immigrants who came from the Middle East or North Africa. They often converse among one another in Arabic. They want to join the Islamic State and the other terror groups in Syria, or have gone and since returned. They are mostly men, usually around age 20 or less, and have grown up feeling alienated from the societies in which they live. Most of this is wrong. In fact, the UK-based Henry Jackson Society has found that, quote, those who convert to Islam are 4 times more likely to become terrorists than those who were born Muslims. In 2015, the Washington Post warned that converts have emerged, quote, as some of the most dangerous and fanatical adherents to radical Islam. And then it says, now a recent study in the Netherlands shows that, quote, the share of converts to Islamist extremism tends to be significantly higher, unquote, than those born into the faith. As many as 17% of Dutch converts have joined the caliphate, the study's authors claim, 7 times more than the percentage of converts to the entire Dutch Muslim community, and most of those are women. Now, it's interesting here because when it says here, those who are born Muslims, and many people say, oh, you're born this, you're born that. So if someone says, hey, yeah, this person's born a Christian. Well, no one's born a Christian. The Bible says that we were conceived in sin, that we were born in sin, not that we had committed sin, but that federal headship of Adam and sinning against Adam and Eve, sinning against God. Even though Eve sinned first, the sin was passed on through Adam and through his seed. And every person is born with a sin nature. You don't have to teach your children how to lie, how to steal, how to talk back, or anything like that. We are sinners. It's not what we do, it's who we are. We aren't sinners because we sin because we're sinners. And here it talks about people who are born Muslims. Now, if Islam is false, which I believe it is, and Christianity is true, again, no one is born a Christian, no one is born a Muslim. But according to Islamic theology, every single person is born a Muslim. They're born a pure monotheist, quote unquote. And just as I believe it's the Quran, not the Hadith, I believe it's the Quran. Yeah, the Quran says that a person's parents make them a Christian or a Jew. Again, that's either the Quran or the Hadith, one of the two. I forget which one. I don't have the reference here, but that's the actual orthodox teaching of Islam, is that everyone is born Muslim. So if you aren't a Muslim right now, then you're not innocent, quote unquote, theologically speaking. Because if you're born a Muslim and you are not now, currently, then you are an apostate theologically. And that's why it is more, according to Islamic theology, it's more accurate to say that a person reverts to Islam and not converts. Revert because they're going back to that religion that they were born with. They're not becoming Muslim for the first time, quote unquote. At least that is the orthodox belief or classical Islamic theology about fitra and the nature of human beings when they are born. So anyway, interesting story here just based on that, because a lot of news stories that talk about this stuff, they don't bring the theology into it. And because of that, even though they could be like against Islam in a sense, as far as the authors, if they don't know Islamic theology, then technically it's inaccurate, one way or the other. So anyway, it's interesting to read all these different news stories from all these different sources when you study Islamic theology. Now, moving on to the Times of Israel, I have Netanyahu rushes to security meet as Temple Mount tensions surge. These are actual metal detectors that are there now when people want to go up to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Now, a mufti has said Allah won't accept prayers through a Zionist metal detector. So a lot of Muslims there are mad about this. It says NRG/MAARIV reported today that the Mufti of Jerusalem has issued a new religious edict for Muslims on Monday. Any Muslim who goes to the Temple Mount to pray at the mosques and enters via the Zionist metal detectors, their prayers will be, quote, invalid and not be received by Allah. Very interesting claim there. And moving on to Al Arabia, I have 3 Palestinians killed in clashes with Israeli forces in Jerusalem. So this is a very recent conflict which is happening. It says here the Palestinian Ministry of Health reported 3 Palestinians were killed by live bullets fired by the Israeli forces in clashes erupting on Friday and after the prayers in Jerusalem. Now, there's 2 photos we're showing you here. I want to show you a quick video if we have time, but we may not have time. So I do apologize for that. Just go to Al Arabia, that's ALARABIYA.net, and you'll be able to find more details about this story, and you'll be able to see the video there as well. Again, this just happened on the 21st, Israel time. I believe they're 10 hours ahead of U.S. or different hours, depending on what time zone you're in the U.S. But yeah, so this is breaking news pretty much out of Israel. Also, too, as I mentioned earlier, there has been a number of news stories about the Somali cop who killed this white woman. And just go online, go to a search engine, type in, let's see here, at WND.com, cop named Mohammed shoots and kills unarmed woman who called 911. Yes, she called 911. And he ended up killing her. So that's a news story that I did mention earlier, so I do want to leave you with that and allow you to look that up as well. Also, I will be posting this video not only on my Vimeo channel, but of course it will be on the Trinity channel's YouTube channel as well. And we want to thank you for being with us for, again, the first Islam in the News episode after a 6-week break. So thank you so much for staying here and waiting for us to come back. We are back, and we hope that you stay with us as well. We will see you next Friday with more Islam and the News.